If you're looking to buy a stacked NBA 2K account with max badges and more, visit sportstmb.com. He has been in the community for years and has hundreds of reviews. Click the first link in the description to get your account today.
Oh boy, well this is going to be a rough one. Before you leave a comment, I am going to be providing plenty of context for the things that I say in this video. As you can see by the length of this video, I'm going to be talking a lot. I'm not going to be just using the same blanket statements that many people do in regards to Allen Iverson. If you are an AI fan, even if I'm going to be saying some negative things about him in this video, I'm going to be respectful about it because I definitely respect Allen Iverson, though some of you may not view it as respectful because you're such a stan. But with that said, if y'all could counter the wave of dislikes that I know I'm going to get just based off of this title, that would be much appreciated, so please drop a like. Now on to the actual video. Allen Iverson is widely considered to be one of the best players to ever play the game. He won 4 scoring titles, as well as having a season where he averaged 33 points a game, where he did not win the scoring title because Kobe in 2006 was fucking ridiculous. He famously won an MVP in 2001, taking his team to the NBA Finals, and he actually got a game in that finals on the Shaq and Kobe Lakers. And he did all of this while being 6 foot tall and not an inch taller. I am taller than Allen Iverson. Now while yes, that is mostly me just trying to flex the fact that I am 6'3", it also highlights just how ridiculous Allen Iverson was. But when you look deeper into the numbers, AI's 2001 run in the finals was overrated, and his scoring numbers weren't quite as impressive as they look in the box score. So while yes, AI accomplished a lot of great things, I feel those things are overblown and that Allen Iverson is overrated. Let's start this video off by going over some of Allen Iverson's career numbers. For his career, he put up 26 points, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds, and he did so on 42, 31, 78 shooting splits, and for his prime, from his 3rd year to his last full season with Philly, he put up 29 points a game on similar splits. These numbers are obviously great. Nearly 30 points per game for an entire prime is very impressive. There is no doubt about that, but there is some context that needs to be applied to these numbers. First of all, Iverson's efficiency is something often talked about and, well, shit on, but I don't think it's as bad as people make it seem. Now, 42% from the field is obviously not good. I consider 45% to be the baseline average okay field goal percentage for a guard. That's not good or bad, but when you get to 43% or below, it is bad, so 42% for your entire prime and career is obviously not good. However, you have to consider the context of his era and his size and his help. What made Jordan more impressive of a scorer than Kobe is that Jordan had a 50% shooting percentage for his prime, while Kobe had a 45% for his prime. Under similar circumstances in terms of pace, space, and era, Kobe scored very similarly to Jordan but missed 5% more shots. In the context of when AI's play was most prominent, the early 2000s, the league's pace wasn't where it is today, but much more importantly, the spacing was nowhere near where it is today. Not just from a lack of talented shooters, but from a lack of respect for that aspect of the game. For an example of how little shooting was valued in the NBA at this time, Allen Iverson's teammate Kyle Korver was traded for money to buy a new copy machine. One of the best shooters to ever play the game was traded for a copy machine. And Iverson had poor spacing even worse than what was typical in his era. In 2000, the Sixers were dead last in threes a game, taking just 8 threes a game, and shooting the 3rd worst percentage at 32%. Think about that. There are a couple of players in the NBA right now who shoot more threes at a better percentage than the Sixers did in 2000. Buddy Hield shoots 10 threes a game at 36%. James Harden shoots 13 threes a game at 38%. Devontae Graham shoots 9.5 threes a game at 39%. Dame shoots 9.6 at 36%. Trae Young shoots 37% on 9.3 attempts. Kemba Walker shoots 9.1 on 40%. Davis Bertans shoots 8.6 on 43%. That is 7 players who shoot more threes at a higher percentage than that 2000 Sixer team. The 2001 Sixers were 29th in attempts, 26th in percentage. In 2002, they were 30th in attempts and 30th in percentage at fucking 29%. 29th in attempts in 2003, 28th in percentage. Then finally an improvement as 24th in attempts and 17th in percentage in 2004. 2005 was another improvement, and then for the second best shooting percentage of his prime, where AI shot 45% from the field in 2006, the Sixers were 12th in three-point percentage. So the best spacing of his prime led to the second best field goal percentage of his career. The season where he shot his best was 2008 with the Denver Nuggets, who were 10th in three-point attempts and at an at least not garbage 19th in percentage. But 10th also equaled 23-point attempts per game, which was double what AI was getting for most of his tenure in Philly. And I really don't hope that I need to explain why spacing is so important for a player's field goal percentage, but I will anyways for some of the ignorant few. The more floor spacers you have, the less help defense you have to worry about. The more help you have to worry about, the lower percentage you will shoot, and the more turnovers you will get. Another issue Iverson was criticized for, with Iverson averaging 3.8 turnovers a game for his prime. But once again, I think that was a matter of circumstances because of a crazy high usage percentage and being one of the few ball handlers on his team. AI had the ball in his hands a lot, which equals a lot of turnovers. So I do think that AI is over scrutinized for his shooting percentage and for his turnovers. His field goal percentage was not great for the situation he was in, but it was also not bad. Perfectly adequate, not something for him to be criticized or praised for. What I do feel is the biggest reason why AI is overrated is his minutes. In Iverson's prime, he averaged an absolutely absurd 42 minutes a game. He led the league in minutes played 7 times. Now, I understand that it is impressive that Iverson was not burnt out by having to play this many minutes. It speaks a lot for the type of athlete that he was. But this does lead to inflated scoring numbers. Since Iverson had weak offensive help, something we'll talk about in a second, he was in the game a lot because the offense was the worst in the NBA when he sat. So while yeah, Iverson was a really great scorer, him barely ever sitting was the main reason why he got to 29 points per game. Per 36 is an iffy stat when talking about a player's numbers when that player gets way less than 36 minutes per game, but I do feel it is a perfectly appropriate stat for rounding a player's minutes down because more minutes equals more opportunity to screw up, so less equals less. If Iverson played 36 minutes per game for his career, which is typical of a player in the modern NBA, his prime averages would be 25 points per game, which obviously isn't nearly as impressive as his 29 a game. Give Iverson normal minutes and he is a 6-foot guard who scores 25 points a game on 42% shooting. Those numbers are similar to like Kemba Walker or Damian Lillard. Those are two really good players, but not the type of guys who are going to consistently be in people's top 40 and even top 30 players of all time. I do want to make one thing clear, I have no interest in taking away for Iverson's impact on the game. Mostly because I can't. Iverson made many players fall in love with basketball, including LeBron James. Iverson was a lot of current players' favorite all-time player. And then there was the style and tattoos. Before Iverson, every NBA player was dressing like Tim Duncan. I obviously know nothing about fashion. You guys see what I wear in my videos. This is an $8 Walmart watch. But the impact there is undeniable. For many people and many players, AI was the NBA, and that is very important, and that impact has huge side effects. But as an actual talent, Allen Iverson was not good enough to be treated like this godlike legend figure that he is. Now I can already hear you guys saying, what about the 2001 season? Well, that one was also overrated in a way. Iverson in 2001 averaged 31 points per game and 4.6 assists, as well as a league best 2.5 steals a game, shooting 42% from the field and 32% from three. Now again, 30 points per game for someone who is 6 feet tall is very impressive. But he averaged 42 minutes a game. Per 36, he averaged just 27 points a game, which means from at least a box score standpoint, Iverson's 2001 season was no more impressive than Isaiah Thomas's 2017 season. I'd actually argue that at least from a box score perspective, Iverson in 2001 was not as good as Isaiah Thomas in 2017. Again, just box score. Because Thomas put up 29 points in just 34 minutes and shot 46% from the field and 38% from three on 8 attempts. As an even shorter player at just 5'9", he also averaged 1.3 more assists. Even with the context of Iverson having much worse spacing, I do think that Thomas had a better year box score wise. Then when you consider the factor of Iverson carrying the 2001 Sixers, he really didn't. The Sixers won 56 games, which was good for the first seed in the Eastern Conference, and this roster was not nearly as bad as it was made out to be. Dikembe Mutombo was only there for 26 games due to trade, but before him there was Theo Ratcliffe in his place, who was an all-star that year, averaging 12, 8, and 3.7 blocks a game. Dikembe was a better player, but Ratcliffe was far from a bad option at center. They had Eric Snow, who yes is mostly known for being crossed into a new reality by Dwayne Wade, but he was also a good starting caliber player. Not a great scorer, but a good passer and defender, averaging 7 assists per game that year, often being the one passing it to AI for the famous Iverson cut play. George Lynch was a decent rebounding small forward and a good defender. Tyrone Hill was a good defender and rebounder, this time at the 4 spot. And they had the 6th man of the year that year, Aaron McKee, whose numbers might not stand out to you that much, but he was a stabilizing force for this Sixers team. And he filled the role as literally the only other guy who took more than 0.7 threes a game outside of Iverson. The shooting was really that bad. This was a solid NBA roster with a superstar on it. The reason people seem to think that this Sixers roster was so bad is the thing that I like to call offensive bias. There are two sides of basketball. While offensive players are more valuable than defensive players, actual offense versus defense is pretty close in value. A great defense with 2 okay offensive players and a superstar offensive player is a great team. A great defensive team with 2 okay offensive players and 1 great superstar offensive player is a good team. It's similar to the 2011 Chicago Bulls or the 2017 OKC Thunder, another roster that is over-criticized. A top-tier defensive team is not ever a bad team. It is not ideal to only have 1 great offensive player, but it does not make the team automatically bad, and it's definitely not in this case. And then for those 2001 playoffs, in the first round, the Indiana Pacers had the foundation of becoming a really good team, but they were not there yet. They made the finals last year, but were just the 8th seed this year. The Vince Carter Raptors gave the Sixers a good fight, with the series going to 7 games, but again, it was not a great team. They only won 47 games that year. And then in the conference finals versus the Bucks, the other 50-win team in the conference, led by Ray Allen and Glenn Robinson, 2 really good but not quite superstar level players. Both averaged 22 points and shot 47%, and they had Sam Cassell at point guard, who was a 18.7 assist guy. Now this series is commonly considered to be rigged, but I actually do not buy that. The biggest point of contempt there is that the Sixers shot like 50 or 60 more free throws in that series than the Bucks did. But the thing is, in 2001, the Sixers were 4th in free throw attempts a game, while the Bucks were 25th, and the Bucks were 7th in fouls a game, and the Sixers were 26th in fouls. So we have a team that fouls a lot and doesn't draw a lot of fouls themselves, versus a team that doesn't foul and draws a lot of fouls. That explains the disparity pretty well. So I don't think that series was actually rigged. There might have been a few wrong calls here or there, but you can find those in any series. But that said, this Bucks team really was not that great. The East in the early 2000s was straight up dog shit. It's an under-talked about aspect of why the Lakers were so dominant. The Pacers were not a great team, but they made it out of the East. The Sixers weren't a great team, but they made it to the finals, and nor were the 2002 Nets. Those were good, but not great teams that made it to the NBA Finals. People love to talk about how shit the Eastern Conference was, and it is, but in the early 2000s, the East is the worst that it's ever been. Probably the worst that any conference has ever been. So the path to the finals was not that challenging for the Sixers and Allen Iverson. Then if we look at the actual finals, there's no doubt that AI's Game 1 48-point performance is very impressive. I have no intention of taking anything away from that. It's one of the best performances in NBA history, and he did very well for the rest of the series outside of Game 2, where he went 10 for 29 and scored 25 points. He put up 35 in Game 3 and Game 4 and 37 in Game 5. However, I feel that Game 1 performance has contributed a little too heavily to AI's legacy, more than actual championships have contributed to star-level players' legacies. Like, I think most people would rank AI way above Tony Parker, someone with 4 rings, with that Game 1 in the 2001 finals being one of the main reasons why. Continuity error. I'm recording this another day later. This video is really fucking long, so I had to split it into 2 parts, but anyways. That Game 1 for AI was an amazing performance, but I do not understand why it has contributed as much as it has to his legacy. The iconic step over Tyronn Lue probably helped that a lot, but to include what I've said so far, Iverson's crazy point averages mostly came from inflated numbers, but for my points so far, Iverson's numbers came from an insane amount of minutes, and by the way, those of you who complain about Iverson's lack of offensive help cannot complain about me criticizing his minutes. The lack of help offensively is why AI played so damn much. If Allen had someone like Chris Webber on his team for his entire career, he wouldn't have played 42 minutes a game for his prime, and his scoring numbers would not have been more than like 24 points per game, which wouldn't have won him many, if any, scoring titles. If he has another great scorer on his team for all of his career, I can't imagine a world where he gets a scoring title. It's a two-way street. There would not have been the legendary crazy amount of points scorer Allen Iverson with more offensive help. You don't get both. You either get a guy who puts up crazy numbers with a poor offense around him, or a guy who puts up good numbers with a good offense around him. And I do want to say that I do not knock AI for never having won a championship. While I do think that that 01 roster wasn't nearly as bad as people make it out to be, it definitely wasn't a great roster, and they definitely were not going to beat the Lakers that year. There was no roster that AI was on that was realistically winning a championship outside of maybe the Denver Nuggets in 2008 with Melo, but even then that was probably a stretch. AI was out of his prime by then. But I do not take issue with him getting praise as a player who never won a championship. It would definitely help me think better of him, but I'm not gonna knock him for it. Now, if I can address what's in the thumbnail obviously says that AI is not a top 5 shooting guard. It's not as cut and dry for me as the thumbnail makes it seem. I really have 2 guys tied for 5th, and those 2 guys are obviously Iverson and then Clyde Drexler. I go back and forth between the 2. Drexler, I feel, is one of the most underrated superstars of all time. For his career, he averaged 26 and 5 on 47% shooting. He was a crazy athlete, a good shot creator and playmaker, and capable shooter. A better one than Iverson later in his career, because another problem with Iverson's game was that he was not a good 3-point shooter. And for the best 5-year stretch of his career in Portland, Clyde averaged 25 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists on 49% shooting while playing just 37 minutes a game. Which, if you remember correctly, is pretty similar stats to Iverson's, except with more rebounds while being a better defender and a 7% more efficient scorer. Now, most of that stemmed from the fact that Clyde Drexler was 6'7" and AI was only 6 foot, but at the end of the day, those numbers are better, fair or not. Iverson had better peak years and a longer prime, but I don't think the difference between the 2 is nearly as big as some people make it out to be. And yet, Iverson is talked about and made out to be a much better player than Clyde Drexler was. So in conclusion, AI's numbers were inflated by crazy minutes, his 2001 run was overblown by getting through a weak East and having one great game versus a dynasty team. His 2001 MVP was kind of overrated as well because of a weak East and inflated numbers. And finally, he is no better than the 5th best 2-guard ever, with Jordan, Kobe, Wade, and Harden ahead of him in that order. The guy's on the same level as like Damian Lillard or Kemba Walker, and that's fine. But he gets treated like one of the 30 best players in NBA history when he simply is not that. I hope this video did not come off as disrespectful because Iverson is a really fun player to watch and I really liked him. But that's the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.